Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Um, Today we have here this doctoral meeting, and Michele Maggini is going to talk about the hyperpartisan news detection, which seems to be a very interesting topic nowadays. And I'm going to quickly introduce his research, and then he will talk. Please, I ask you to hold your questions until the end, and then he will kindly address all of them. With the rise of digital technologies, social networks have become the primary source of information for many people. However, these platforms are increasingly contaminated with misinformation and extremist content, contributing to political polarization. This research analyzes the structure of such content to understand how partisan media communicate with audiences and reinforce polarization in democratic societies. The focus lies in exploring novel approaches to detect hyperpartisan news in Europe, using hybrid methods ranging from the computational modeling of linguistic features to more technical tools such as large language models. Without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction. Bienvenidos a todas y todos. I'm going to show you my current work so far. Well, I'm part of the Hybrid project, and the thesis is on hyperpartisan news detection. But what is an hyperpartisan news, first of all? An hyperpartisan news, like in the example, is symbolic associations and we could say that it is an extremely polarized news, but this is a very, very simple definition. Let's take into account this headline. Immigrazione, Trump avvelena il sangue del nostro paese. Immigration, Trump, it poisons our country's blood. We can find different usage of linguistic cues in terms of pragmatics, like symbolic associations, imperative discourse, euphemistic discourse, preventive discourse, and political agendas. Like with the symbolic associations, they have been adopted to share the same mindset amongst the same group of polarized users. They could be from right wing or also left wing. The imperative discourse is they are used to reply, to respond towards the opposite audience. I mean, if I'm from left, I will try to opposite my ideas towards the right and inversely. While the euphemistic discourse is to build discursive walls through which others cannot see the reality of the situation they hide, because polarized news try always to hide a part of the news, so they are framing the reality and the truth. In our first work, that was a systematic review of automated hyperpartisan news detection, we analyzed plenty of papers, and we found that hyperpartisanship, this kind of construct, is intersected with different and several biases, like spin bias, a dominant bias, opinion statement bias, ideology bias, framing, coverage, and political. But those biases don't take into account the logical fallacies and the other linguistic cues that could be like metaphors, irony, and so on. But to keep it short, hyperpartisan news are acknowledged to exhibit on one side political bias. So let's move straight forward. The systematic review comprehended the revision of more than 1,000 papers, and we selected them through keywords and with the adoption of AI to remove duplicates. And at the end, after the screening process, we analyzed around 81 articles. The main findings are that we are the first one to propose a literature review on hyperpartisan news detection only. The research shows that by introducing more fine-grained label sets that help the models to have a higher performance. Otherwise, well, instead of using only binary labels to do the classification, because as a matter of fact, most of the works we analyzed, they model the hyperpartisan news detection as a binary classification. That, I mean, it is an important work so far, but we have to think to model this issue, this problem, by introducing a more detailed level of annotation. As I discussed before, there are several biases to be taken into account, and so on. Plus, the current state of the art lacks the use of LLMs, or they have only partially adopted, like in minority languages such as the Persian. And the most important issue with the NLP, within the NLP community, is the fact that this topic has been covered only from, not only, but mostly from American point of view and using the English language. So the first work we did was then to effectively compare the different architectures, like LLMs, I mean decoder only, against decoder encoder only, and using different techniques like fine-tuning and in-context learning. The second research question for this paper that has been accepted to ICWSM was the impact of what is the impact of different in-context learning strategies in terms of performance and stability. Thus, we included few short examples and rule-based methods, like the introduction of the codebooks and chain of thought in the prompt. The third research question investigates how do performance and optimal strategies for these tasks vary across different languages, especially for mid and low resource languages. The last question led us to select different tasks that are in the same family, in the same spectrum of hyperpartisan news detection, but also to consider different datasets covering different languages. Indeed, for this work we selected 10 datasets covering 5 languages and 4 different misinformation tasks. But also the typology of the task were different. Like we have a binary classification and multi-class classification tasks with 2 types of documents, like sentence or headlines. As I discussed, regarding the prompts, in context learning methodology, we also adopted different levels of specificity in terms of prompts. Like we have a general prompt where we only insert the task and ask the model to classify the news, and then we went further with a specific prompt, and with the collaboration with political scientists, we introduced the political knowledge with definitions of the phenomena for fake news detection, hyperpartisan news detection, harmful tweet detection, and political bias detection. As I mentioned before, we introduced also the codebook, that it is a sort of rule-based approach to classify the data, so that in those codebooks, I'm going to show you an example, we have it's not properly formatted. I know, it is a mess, but believe me, that we have the description of the task and several borderline cases with examples, so that the LLM could have more context and most importantly, rule-based approach toward the classification, so that it will not leverage only its internal knowledge. Then, as a final approach in context learning, we have the chain of thought, where the different steps that in total are between 8 and 9 follows an increasing difficulty level of abstraction in terms of the tasks, because each step represents subtask. Let's say in the first step we start from the lexical cues and the sentiment analysis to go beyond and to the last step that mention the intent and the purpose of the headlines that we are going to classify. So we start from textual cues up to abstract cues. For this experiment, we analyze different decoder and encoders, like Roberta, XLM Roberta, Politics, and the LLMs like Llama, Mistral, and Quen. So far, in the fine-tuning approach, the decoder was generally better than encoders, specifically on tasks requiring factual word knowledge in general. While the encoder, for instance, in hyperpartisan news detection and harmful tweet detection, was better, especially Roberta Large. While considering the in-context learning approach, maybe if you're distant you cannot see properly all the plots, I'm sorry. We can say that while passing from the generic prompt to this more specific prompt, so with the introduction of description of the phenomena and so on, the improvements are minimal. But for a dataset, in terms of hyperpartisanship, that it was the SH dataset, the prediction was better. While for the introduction of the codebook, generally this approach was, let's say, not the contrary of suboptimal, well, optimal, yeah, more simply, was very optimal. That meant that the models, while leveraging the internal representation of the factual of the factual knowledge of the words and the political knowledge of the words, they let's say, well, they benefited by the introduction of rule-based approaches. While what was unexpected was the chain of thought result, because it led only minimal improvements across all the models except for Quen. In terms of variance, we also tested the in-context learning, the few-shot approach with by selecting random examples from our datasets and also selecting them through the DPP methods. That it consists on selecting the most representative data points in our datasets. Those benefited generally the models only in terms of variance and not in terms of performances. That meant that generally the prediction were more stable, but it didn't lead to a better performance across all the models. Then after we compared those models, well, those architectures, we decided to improve, to introduce more labels in our annotation. So far, as I said, the hyperpartisan news detection was modeled as a binary task, and also we did it, but we introduced linguistic traits and logical fallacies. Like, the linguistic traits we considered were the loaded language, metaphors, epithets, neologism, irony and sarcasm, but also agents and terms, and hyperbolic language. And we introduced the logical fallacies by taking inspiration from De San Martino's work, and they were 17. So in this paper, we wondering what was the feature importance of introducing those linguistic cues. and also to make the hyperpartisan task more complex. And we wanted to analyze the difference between introducing the pragmatic levels of, the two pragmatic levels amongst the logical fallacies against the linguistic traits. Secondly, we did an ablation study to assess the impact of both pragmatic semantic and pragmatic logical annotations. And then we also employed two LLMs, Llama 70B quantized in 4-bit and GPT-4o mini, to assess the validation of the introduction of those new linguistic cues. So the scope of the paper was to evaluate the contribution of linguistic traits in hyperpartisan detection and release an Italian dataset covering different topics that are those like the war in Ukraine, the climate change, the migration in Europe, and the COVID, and also other Europe-related topics. The number of articles was more than, well, we analyzed more than 100 articles, and we annotated them at the paragraph level to have a fine-grained dataset. As you can see, most of the hyperpartisan paragraphs concentrated in the first two deciles of. I'm talking about the plot on the upper right. We have the article position on the x-axis, and the hyperpartisan paragraphs concentrate amongst the first two deciles and on the last one. This is a communication strategy, because in order to grasp the reader's attention, it is essential to have let's say communication strategy that could pique his or her attention. And what was interesting was the fact that in terms of logical fallacies and linguistic traits, we have plotted the log ratio. That means positive values contribute to the detection of hyperpartisan content, while negative values contribute to the detection of neutral content. Most of the logical fallacies contributes with significantly contribute to the detection of hyperpartisan content, while all of the linguistic traits contribute with a high significance to the detection of hyperpartisan paragraphs. We wanted to ensure that the introduction of those features was successful, and indeed we we applied the integrated gradient. That is an explainable technique to understand the contribution of the inputs of each token toward the final classification. We have the normal non-trait tokens that were the non-labeled token as linguistic traits, the special tokens that are the CLS and so on in the encoders models, and also all the other tokens. Generally, the ratio was that this plot explains that models usually don't, while used as out-of-the-box tools, they don't put particular attention to the linguistic traits. Thus, we said maybe that by introducing them with specific embeddings in the fine-tuning process of the model, that could be a sort of improvement. Indeed, the fine-tuning results showed a boost in terms of performance around, if I'm not wrong, 15% or 20%. And then we computed an ablation study towards both the logical fallacies and the linguistic traits. And on the right plot, we can see that while ablating on the logical fallacies, well, if ablating the logical fallacies led to an average drop of only 0.5%, the ablation of the linguistic traits led to a drop of around 14%. It was, we found same results across the LLMs with more unstable performance, and we could say that, well, that in terms of our findings, we should introduce, well, we should model the hyperpartisan news detection by introducing linguistic cues such as metaphors, irony and sarcasm, hyperbolic language, and so on. We wanted to specialize further and covering more languages other than Italian only. So with my colleagues, we created another dataset called the Partisan Lens that covers underrepresented languages in the NLP landscape, and they are Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese. Portuguese, I refer to Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese. In this, for this work, we made a joint annotation scheme covering hyperpartisan detection, PRCT, and stance. PRCT is an acronym for it is like I can't remember the immigration towards immigration, like, but in a population replacement. Population replacement conspiracy theories. For this work, we also introduced some baselines and LLM experiments to see if they could be used as annotator. In this case, we report the Fleiss kappa that was pretty strong across all the languages, especially in Spain. But because in Spain, for the Spanish dataset, well, for the Spanish data points, most of the data points were neutral, unfortunately. We have an example here of our annotation. This is the headline. Trump suggests creating a UFC-style fighting league made up of violent migrants. In this case, the headline was labeled as true, PRCT false, and the stance was against immigration. We also crafted rationales to fine-tune the model Llama to increase, well, to see if by introducing those rationale, I mean, to explain further the annotation of specific data points, it could lead to improvements. And also there are the different sources. We covered from more than 300 sources. We present the benchmarks so far, and we found that Llama 70B currently outperformed most of the models across all the tasks. And, well, three main insights emerge from those results. Like, the first one is that the supervision matters, because fine-tuning led to better results. The scale helped, but is not enough. Llama 70 is most consistent, but, well, yet Llama 8B few shot matches top hyperpartisan scores. The third insight is that the task complexity varies. The most difficult is stance. Then we have the hyperpartisan, and then PRCT detection. The last experiment was to understand if we could use the LLMs as annotators, and what we found is that we couldn't, at least with our dataset, because we have a high intragroup agreement, but a very low intergroup agreement. I mean, human pairs had a high agreement in terms of coins kappa, and same it was for machine-machine. But while comparing the annotation from the two distinct groups, we found that they were suboptimal. I mean under kappa scores of 0.6. So we currently cannot rely on them, and I think that for it is. That's all. I mean, those are the publications made so far. I reported only the most important one, and thank you for your attention.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Just a second, I will give you a microphone.
So it seems that the Portuguese case is even more difficult, right?
Yeah.
Can you comment on about that?
Yeah, that was because, firstly, we think that the LLMs we used were not properly trained on Portuguese, because Portuguese is an underrepresented language in the NLP landscape. I mean, the LLMs could generally use by being prompted with Portuguese and they reply on Portuguese, but for those difficult tasks that they are related to subjective task definitions and so on, it is not properly, well, it was suboptimal. But also because the Portuguese, if I'm not wrong, had very difficult cases in terms of PRCT that humans discussed a lot. Like we spent more than 60 hours in the annotation because we were a huge group of annotators. So this is what, this is how our motivation to reply to this.
And have you analyzed the type of errors that they make? I mean, whether they make more false positives or false negatives, the LLMs? Because, you know, I was thinking that the Spanish and Italian results are not that bad, right?
Yeah.
And perhaps, you know, in some kind of human-in-the-loop approach where you use the LLM as an initial filter and then you show the output to humans, they could be helpful with these numbers. Because in my experience, with this level of agreement, sometimes, you know, you can still exploit them. Not the Portuguese results, because as you mentioned, they are really low, but perhaps the Spanish and Italian cases could be exploited. But anyway, I was wondering about the type of errors.
We made an error analysis, and we found that, especially in Portuguese, the false negative and the false positive were higher, like in the annotation. If a human labeled something as hyperpartisan, the model completely made the prediction wrong, the opposite. We thought that it was due to also the internal political knowledge of the model that didn't reflect the left-wing political orientation. Because unfortunately, most of our annotators were left-wing. And also Llama should be left-wing, because there were several papers where their political leaning was computed through the Compass text. And so there is an empirical evidence with this kind of, with our work, that the true state of left-wing is not reflected into the left-wing state of LLMs. So we are currently wondering how it is possible and so on. But this is entailed and related to the results.
Okay.
I remember that another error that the model made in terms of Portuguese was that some headlines in Brazilian Portuguese contained a term that was imigrantes, and that is currently the name of a highway in Brazil. And we thought that most of the times the model didn't recognize this term as a noun for immigrants, but it recognized this term as a term for immigrants instead of the name of the highway. Thanks.
Any more comments or questions?
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I was wondering in the annotation process, in the,
Of
yes,
which
that
one?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
How do you define the labels or the people of the annotators? How you establish the labels or define them?
Well, let's consider that this is the last work we have made in terms of annotation. So, first of all, well, with the previous dataset, we started building the annotation guidelines, and after the systematic literature review, we were more confident in how modeling the hyperpartisan label. And most of the times we relied on social science literature to craft them, specifically for hyperpartisan and PRCT. Like we read plenty of papers. We tried to match the definition we want to analyze with the topics we are going to analyze, because there could be a mismatch. Like in terms of let's say, in this case, partisan lens that takes into account only migration-related topics. In this case, we have to put limitations also on what is defined as hyperpartisan. So, after putting those limitations in terms of the topics and the data we are going to analyze, we have a sort of background, something to start with. And then we start to revise random data points to to gather a knowledge about what we are going to study and to define. After that, after this consolidation process, we can start to write properly the annotation guidelines, remembering to insert the borderline examples and how to annotate them, and so on. Thanks.
And the other one is related to the Portuguese, question. I was wondering if did you use news from Portugal and Brazil?
Yeah.
As far as I know, even when both speak Portuguese, their Portuguese is really different. Mm-hmm. That could impact the results or not?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we didn't go through to differentiate between Brazilian Portuguese and European Portuguese, because currently our dataset is small, like 1,500 entries. So making this fine-grained analysis was difficult. Also because the annotation process took a lot, but we could plan to do it. Thanks for this insight.
Thank you.
Any more questions? If not, I say thank you to the presenter and I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.